Alrighty, welcome guys. Merry Christmas to all. Today we're going to be rating all the tier 10 tanks that are in World of Tanks. Please ask for no hate. I know I'm not a pro at this game. Alright, I know it. Alright, I know. I've only got 3 tier 10s and I'm almost got my 4th. Okay? This is my opinion of what it's like going up against these tanks, my knowledge of the tanks, of the game, of the meta, things like that. So I hope you guys enjoy. And just before we begin, if you have any comments or any sort of opinions that you have of these tanks or things you'd like to share, please share them down below in the comments. All right, let's begin. All right, so as you can see here, we've got all the tier 10 tanks. I may be missing a few, but I'm pretty damn sure I've got all of them. If I did miss some, let me know down in the comments below. I've renamed some of these tiers. We've got from God tier to remove, pretty much, and everything in between. We'll go through it as we continue with this review. All right, starting off, we got the Chinese 113. This tank, it performs mostly like every other Russian tank, heavy tank. You know, it's got good turret armor, little weak points on them. It's got okay hull armor. The one issue is that it's quite awkward to play because you only have 7 degrees of gun depression on the sides. So on the front, which is where you want to be pointing, because the side armor of this thing is horrendous and it's quite a big target. So honestly, I would put it in not special. Like it's not a unique kind of gameplay. It's just all right. It's not trash because it's got good alpha and it's somewhat decent DPM. So yeah. Okay, moving on to the WZ-111-5A. This is a strong tank. Strong. It's got great gun handling. It's all-round decent. It's very versatile. It's got good armor. It's got a good gun, good DPM. It's just a solid tank. So we're going to put it in the strong tier. Next, we've got the WZ-111 Key Lin, right? It's got a good combo of decent ammo, mobility, gun depression, nice armor. It's not the greatest at side scraping, but it'll be good on a ridgeline. So I'm also just going to keep it in the strong tier. It's nothing elite per se. Next up, we've got the 113 Beijing Opera. This is a bond tank you can buy from the bond store for 15,000 bonds. It's pretty solid. I wouldn't say it's anything super special. Again, it's kind of awkward to play. It's got that 7 degrees of gun depression only on the sides, just like its, I guess, tech tree regular kind of counterpart, the 113. Yeah, it's pretty much in the same field as the 113. It's roughly the same tank. All right, and next we've got the new BZ-75. This is the newest Chinese tank in the game. It's a rocket-powered tier 10 with a really big alpha gun. Now, this is the kind of a tank that, in my opinion, shouldn't be played by the majority. It's not something that everybody can play. It's got a very aggressive niche to it. You need to be aggressive to play this kind of a tank. What it's good at is surprising its opponents by getting to these sort of positions early that heavy tanks usually wouldn't be able to be at, right? It's got pretty okay pen. It's got nice HE rounds, and it's got decent turret armor. I can show you here. You can see on its 3D model, right? It's got these weak points, 3 in the middle. So it's possible to get penned in the turret. Even when you're using your gun depression, they're still very visible. However, it's got a really great upper hull and great turret armor. So if they miss and they hit somewhere here, it's most likely going to bounce. But like I said before, this tank is meant to catch people off guard. It's meant to surprise them. It's meant to deal these big alpha damage shots and fall away so that you can outtrade your opponents. So I'm going to put it in strong because I do like the kind of playstyle that it has for me personally. So next up, we have the VZ-55. This was straight up the best heavy tank in the game when it came out. However, it has been nerfed. I wouldn't say it's God tier anymore. It's still very strong. I'm going to put it in elite. That ability to have that double shot autoloader that really can damage people and a lot of the time finish off like mid to lower tier health tanks. It's similar to the BZ in a way that it's really good at catching people off guard and you can trade really well with it. you know, it's got decent-ish turret armor. You know, it's got weak points. Most tier 8s can even deal with the weak points. So it's not the greatest, like, ridgeline kind of tank. But it can go hull down and can do somewhat decent there. So I would severely recommend the VZ55. Next up, we've got the AMX 50B. This is a French tier 10 heavy autoloading tank. It's super fast, and it can burst out damage really quickly. Similar to the VZ in a way that it can outtrade its opponents. And this is a bit of a tricky one because you can play this tank as like a super mobile, basically medium tank, and absolutely shred all the medium tanks that you come up against. You know, it doesn't have the greatest armor, but what it lacks in armor, it makes up for in the fact that it can burst out so much damage. It is a great support heavy, and for this reason, I'm going to put it in strong. I don't think it's elite. I don't think it's as good as the VZ55, but it can be very fun for a lot of people to go for, so I do recommend this tank. Following the AMX 50B, we've got an AMX M454. This was straight up god tier. I don't know what Wargaming does. Sometimes they absolutely buff a tank into oblivion and it becomes the most overpowered thing ever. Since then, it has been nerfed a bit and it's not as good as it used to be. However, it's still an elite tank. This tank is phenomenal. It's good on a ridgeline. It has great alpha. It's great for trading. Its turret is really strong, but not broken. You know, it has weak points. Even tier 8s can deal with those weak points. But it's a ridgeline. It's a ridgeline god. It's pretty good. For example, it can outtrade a Super Conqueror on a ridgeline if you manage to catch them off guard. But overall, I would say a Super Conqueror is probably better than it, right? Next up, we've got the Panzer Kampfwagen 7. This tank is awful trash. I hate this tank. It's so easy to play against. I personally, obviously, I haven't played it myself, but this tank is all the armor on this tank is built for side scraping. It just has a huge weak point on the side. I can show you it. Yeah, it's got this huge weak point on the side that makes it pretty much, you know, if you're side scraping like this, it's just a big old weak point. People can shoot it before you're even able to see them with your gun. Tier 8s, even if there was tier 7s, like if it was tier 8, tier 10 tanks, this thing would get penned by tier 7s. Along with that, it's got these weak points on the side of the mantlet here. So if you just load up gold, even this starts becoming pennable, and it's just an awful tank. I think it is deserving of a buff. It needs a buff. Even its DPM is not that great. You know, it's got pretty good alpha, but not the best penetration. So this thing needs some love from Wargaming. Next up, from the German heavies, we've got the Maus. I am about to get this tank, but I've seen plenty of gameplay and I've played against it a lot. I would put this in the elite tier. It's not quite godlike because it's got some weaknesses that it's very slow, and people can just fire gold straight at the cheeks and it can't really do much. However, this thing against lower tiers is disgusting. If you hook it up with the durability module and turbo and like a gun rammer, you can do some filthy things in this tank. With the Maus as well, it's really good with that durability module. You get the highest HP in the game. You can literally just push through a flank where other tanks are holding and they can't do anything about it. You know, they try track you, you just repair them, or they try track you, they're already they're high HP tracks, they're very strong, so people won't be able to track you, and you just go, and it's really good for those like aggressive kind of players. So I would recommend it. But yeah, Maus, top tier tank, dude. E100, this is now a similar sort of tank as the Maus. I'm just gonna put this tank in strong. I don't think it's nothing special because it's got that great armor, but I would say it's worse than the Maus. Now, I know it has a better gun than the Maus. Technically, it's more accurate, it's more reliable, but where it fails, the E100's cheeks, right? If you just load gold, this is all pinnable. Look at this. Even when you're using, you know, your gun depression, still, this is pinnable by a lot of tier 10 heavies and a lot of tier 10 tank destroyers, and even some medium tanks can pin these lower parts. But if you take a look at the mouse, right, this is straight up the cheeks. When you load gold, it's a smaller area. It's harder to hit per se. But overall, the E100 it's not a bad tank. It's not something I would recommend anyone going for. I've dealt with this thing a lot, and it's not super scary. It's way more scary to see a mouse turning around a corner than it is an E100. Next up, we've got the VK7201K. This tank is basically the same as the Panzerkampfwagen 7. However, it has slightly higher alpha. It's less accurate, but you know, it's got higher premium penetration. It's trash. It's more or less the same kind of tank, dude. It's not for my playstyle. It's got the same weak point. It's the same kind of turret. It's built for the same thing, but in my opinion, it's just as bad. You know, there's a couple things where they trade each other, but that's about it. Next up, we've got the Kampfpanzer 07PE. This tank is quite new. It was released this year. It's a really strong heavy tank. It's got decent armor on the ridgeline. It's accurate. It's got 0.32 accuracy. It's pretty fast for a heavy tank, 50 k's an hour base with the turbo 55, 56 if you're upgrading that stuff. It's got good DPM. It's got pretty okay ammo, but really good HE, 105 millimeters of penetration, as far as I remember. But it's got very good view range for a heavy tank, 410 meters base view range, which is insane. There's some medium tanks that don't even get that. So this thing overall, I would put it in elite. Even its upper hull is quite strong. Maybe it can't side scrape as well as some heavies, but it's with the meta right now. That hold down, get on a ridgeline, good gun depression, good gun, good DPM. It's all good. I think it's a great tank. Following up after the Kampfpanzer, we've got the Rinoceronte. Now this tank recently got a buff. It used to be terrible, but really good in the hands of a good player. But let's be honest, any good player is going to be able to play any tank really well. The Rinoceronte is really great if you know how the compensation mechanic works. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially, it's an auto reloader, so it reloads shells one by one. As you shoot, there's like a little timer that goes smaller and smaller and smaller. So if you shoot the next round in the auto loading magazine, before it's fully reloaded, the shell, it gives you a compensation on the reload. So for example, if it's about to reload, then you shoot, then that same shell reload would be less than what it usually is because of the compensation mechanic, right? So it's good if you know about like everything about that compensation mechanic, how to make it work. It's really great if you have support because you have really good burst damage potential with this kind of tank. And like honestly, even on a ridgeline, it's got like a small weak point, and even these little slants over here are pretty well angled, so it'll do well against most tanks. Overall, I would recommend this kind of player. I would put it's strong. I don't think it's elite. I think it's strong, but could be even god tier if you're really good with these kind of tanks. But I would recommend it. It's a great tank. Following the Rinoceronte, we've got the Type 5 Heavy. Remove this tank, dude. Just remove this tank. It's awful. You might as well play the Type 4 Heavy at tier 9. It's practically identical. It's the exact same tank, just a tier lower, and you have the chance to meet tier 7s. This tank, I don't know what they were thinking. They didn't make it, these flat pieces of armor make this thing pretty much pinnable from any angle. So it's not that great. It's just not a good tank, man, in my opinion. Moving on, we've got the 60 TP. This tank is god tier. This is a great tank. Fantastic. I play it. It's got one of my highest win ratios. I'm an average player, and I get like 60% wins in this tank, and that's really good. I think my normal ratio is like 49 or 48 or something. So this tank is so good. It's not broken, but it's amazing. On a ridgeline, it's fantastic. 8 degrees of gun depression. It's got really high alpha. It's got great HE pen with 90 millimeters, 950 alpha. You can hit tanks for over 1,000 if you're lucky. It's great at outtrading its opponents. It can even side scrape. It has little weak points. But the main focus is that turret, man. It can get overmatched on this top plate. I can show you. As you can see here, this top plate can get overmatched. However, it's only overmatchable by like high caliber guns. I believe it's 151 and higher. Yeah, and this is 152 millimeter armament. So only the really big boy guns will be able to do that to you. But as you can see, when you're using that gun depression, man, and if you're able to hide your hull, that's the only part that they even have a chance of penetrating. So this thing on a ridgeline fits the meta. It's a phenomenal tank. It's great against all sorts of environments. It's super versatile. I 10 out of 10 recommend the 60 TP. It's great. I love playing it, and it's probably my favorite tier 10 heavy that I have. Moving on, we've got the Krang Vong. Now this tank was top of the top for a long time. It was the best tank you could play in any of the competitive modes. But since then it got nerfed. It's not terrible anymore. I mean, it's still not terrible. It's not good. I would just put it as strong because it can still work. You know, I think it's 12 degrees of compression on a ridgeline. It's got that amazing turret. Nobody can pen it. It's got a really nice autoloader that if you know how to work autoloaders, you're gonna love this tank. So I would recommend this tank. It's strong. Next up, we've got the FV215B. This is an awful tank. Get this out the game. This tank has only one good thing going about it. It's got good DPM. That is it. Just like the Panzerkampfwagens, it's got that weak point on the side, but even its turret can get penned by certain tanks depending on what you're looking at. Its hull armor's comparable to those kind of tanks. I hate this tank. This is my personal opinion. Get this thing out the game, dude. Why is it even in the bond store? All right, and thankfully, moving on after that, we've got the God tier Super Conk. This thing is broken, man. This thing is so good. I absolutely cannot wait to play this tank. Every time I play against it, I shit myself. On a ridgeline, it's God tier, right? It's just got this amazing 10 degrees of gun depression, beautiful spaced armor. You cannot pen this, man. Unless you have super high penetration rounds here, you can aim for this. But if they're a really good player, they're going to be moving back and forth, and you're not going to be able to hit this. And even if they're a really, really good player, they're going to hide that even more and just peek out with the gun. And that is a terrifying thing to face. You know, overall, you can sort of side scrape. It's got these weak points over here. You know, you can even go through parts of the turret here and the hull armor, but it can do its thing. It can do its thing. It's a small weak point. But yeah, solid tank. Overall, great DPM, great alpha, really nice penetration, really, really nice HE rounds. It's pretty accurate. There's nothing much else to say except it is the meta right now. The Super Conqueror is the World of Tanks meta. Moving on, we've got what I would call the premium version of the Super Conqueror, the Chieftain, and I think this thing is still God tier even after the nerf. It is phenomenal. It does everything that the Super Conqueror does, even better. It's faster, you know, it's got better DPM. It's literally an amazing tank, and it is super rare, and I know it's hard to get, but it's a great tank. I would recommend it. Moving on, we've got the T57 Heavy. This thing needed a lot of love, and Wargaming gave it to it. Let me tell you, I think this tank, for my kind of playstyle, is elite. It has a great autoloader. It's got pretty decent armor. It can deal with most tier 8s. It's got one of the highest burst damages in all of World of Tanks, and it's a heavy tank. It's fast. It's great. Its gun is reliable. You put some vert stabs on that baby, it's going to be absolutely slapping tanks. This thing basically blurs the lines between a heavy and a medium tank, so it's got that speed, it's got the gun. It's a great tank. I would recommend it. After that, we've got the M5Y. My goodness. This tank is trash. Straight up trash. I don't think it's bad enough to get it out the game, but this thing is trash. Oh, the amount of times that I've played in a 60 TP and this thing just comes around, tries to peek on a ridgeline. Since its turret is locked to the hole, it kind of just moves as an entire unit. I can show you that real quick. So even when it's trying to use its gun depression, you can see the entire turret moves up and down. So the weak point is always the same size. It's always the same amount of visibility, right? It's got a horrible side profile. This is all pinnable, and this is going to get pinned by HE rounds on some tanks, even up here and on the hull, definitely. You can see it's got fantastic turret armor, but this weak point, man. Some tier 6s can deal with this weak point. It's horrible, dude. It needs to be smaller, I think, because, you know, on a ridgeline, you know, this hull armor is great, the turret armor is great, but that weak point, I slap it with a 60 TP at like mid range. You know, it's a lot easier to hit than some people think. So I just think, even though it has, you know, pretty good DPM, it's pretty okay mobility wise. You know, it's got good dispersion values. It's pretty accurate. It's supposed to be this ultimate on a ridgeline god, but it's just not. I just don't see it that way. It's got quite a niche playstyle, and if you're not that kind of player, I wouldn't recommend it at all. Moving on, we've got the T110E5. This is an all-round amazing tank. Great gun. I absolutely love this tank. I really want to get it, and I think it's phenomenal. It does have this weak point, and that is something you can sort of kind of little bit remove with gun depression, but it's still really easy to hit. The trick with this tank is to kind of do this like backwards and forwards motion to, you know, hide the weak point, or alternatively, swing your gun around to the other side and try to have some sort of like, you know, wall going up and down over here. And even try and show it with a calculator real quick. Something like this. You know, if you're peeking, if you're side scraping in this tank, it's going to work great on this with this angle. As you can see, it's got this boat-shaped hull, which is just going to auto ricochet. You can even over angle slightly for the bottom. So, you know, you're side scraping like this, a good freaking luck hitting that weak point if this thing is looking at you. All round great tank. I think this thing is phenomenal. I think everybody will be able to make it work if you can get around that weak point. So I would recommend it. So we're done with the Americans. Let's move on to the Russians. As everybody knows, there's a plethora of Russian heavy tanks, and in my opinion, they're all similar in a way. You know, this one, the Object 260, which is next, it's fast, it's got a good turret, it's got a good gun, it's not special. I wouldn't say it's bad, but it's just nothing super special. You know, it's very well-rounded, and in that regard, it kind of makes me want to put it in strong because it's so versatile and can do so many things. I wish there was almost, it's in between these two for me, and for my kind of play style, I'm going to just put it as not special. I don't think it's super special. I would recommend it if it's your kind of a play style, you know, fast, heavy, you know, okay on a ridgeline, bad gun depression, good turret armor, that kind of thing. Moving on from the Object 260, we've got the Object 705A. Now, this thing is just not special, man. The only good thing that this tank is good at, you know, for anybody who's ever played it, who's seen it, who's gone up against it, will tell you the exact same thing. This is all it does. That's it. And it slaps you for 650 and then has terrible DPM, reloads a long time, terrible accuracy, might not even hit you. It's just not a grand tank, dude. Honestly, it just sits in these hold down positions, side scraping. Maybe it has some sort of ramp or, you know, barricade something here. You know, even its low plate is weak from the front, but as soon as they turn it to the side like this, it's just, you got these little bit of weak points over here. Maybe you can do something like this. It's slightly better, but this is all these kind of players do. You know, if you're slightly above it, you have a chance to just absolutely dominate this thing with HE. But to be honest, it's just boring, dude. It's a boring tank. It does the same thing every single game. And if you see somebody trying to just push with this thing, just aim for its low plate. It's gonna lose. You can out trade it, you can out DPM it. Make sure it just doesn't get away. Moving on, we've got the Object 277. This thing dominates mediums, in my opinion. I think it's great. I think it's pretty similar to the Object 260, but I would recommend this tank to go for in the tech tree. It's got a really nice line going up to it. It's really easy for new players. I would say it's quite noob friendly. It's got, you know, good armor. It's got a good gun. It's just the standard Russian heavy tank, man. There's nothing super special about it. Moving on, we've got the Object 279E. This thing is still straight up god tier, man. And, you know, props to you if you're able to actually grind to get this thing, because the campaign missions are super long and can be super hard and dreadful for a lot of players. And that's why you see this thing packing such a good win ratio, is because only the best players are playing it. And to be honest, it's so easy to play. It's got absolutely disgusting armor. As you can see, you know, it's got these cupolas, you know, wow, but as soon as it uses its gun depression, good luck, dude. Good luck hitting this thing. Good luck penning this hull. What a good strategy with this thing is to wedge it up and kind of get these auto ricochets going. You can side scrape even in it slightly. You know, this becomes pennable, but you can bait people. You can over angle even at some stages, something like this, and bait people into shooting your sides for the tracks. And, you know, the special thing about this tank is that it doesn't have a lower plate. It just runs on 4 tracks. It's a very freaky tank, but I think it's really broken, understandably. And I hate going up against this thing. Even with, you know, I've gone from certain tanks, like I think my Conway at tier 9, the standard rounds are orange on this thing, you know, 200 and whatever. And then even my gold rounds go orange, and then the gold rounds still bounce, and it's just annoying. It's just annoying. But yeah, the idea, if you have this tank, I'm sure you know, wedge that whole armor, baby, and over angle. This thing is an absolute beast with phenomenal DPM for its kind of a caliber of tank. After that, we've got my first tier 10, the ST2. This tank, I would say it is strong. It has the highest alpha that a heavy tank can deliver at tier 10 in the game if you hit the salvo, right? Because it's got that double gun system. If you know how to work the double gun system, it's absolutely amazing, and you can outtrade your opponents. It's got it's got pretty good ammunition. It's nothing like special, but the one issue is that it has this stupid weak point, which is not present on the tier 9, the IS-32. This thing is huge, man. It's way easier to hit this weak point than it is on the IS-32. But even when you're using the gun depression, it does become a little bit stronger, and like you're gonna need to load gold to go through it reliably with most tanks. But you know, 320 millimeters of armor. It's still really good. It's got a good turret. It's got good armor. You know, look at that side scraping profile. You can even side scrape really effectively in this vehicle. And for that reason, I would 10 out of 10 recommend this tank. It's got a very fun system. Obviously, the double shot mechanic. If you can learn to make that thing work, like I have and like some of my friends have, it's great. It's great. Would recommend. Moving on from the ST2, we've got the Object 780. It's got great alpha, 530. It's got a good gun, decent handling, all that stuff. It's great. There's one issue with this tank, in that's that it has a 3-man crew, as far as I remember. There's no dedicated loader, so there's super high pressure on your crew members, and you kind of need a really good crew to run this tank. Another issue with it is that there's no other tank like it, so you can't use your IS-7 crew for this thing. Yeah, overall, I would say that it's strong. I think it's strong. You know, it's got a decent turret. It's better than the Object 260, just in my opinion. Following the Object 780, we've got the IS-7. This tank is elite. I think this tank is great for new people. It's probably one of the best heavies you can get. If you set it up with like a mobility and ramming build, you can do some disgusting things to some tanks. And if you've ever seen IS-7 IS 70 kilometer per hour gameplay videos. They're hilarious and I love watching them. Would recommend this tank. Great armor, great gun, fast, very fast for its kind of a caliber of tank. All right, next we've got the IS-4. This thing got buffed, and I would honestly say it's a strong tank. I think it's a really good tank. It wasn't that great before that, but since it's buff, you know, it's got a good turret. It's got, you know, it doesn't have the best of accuracy, but because of that armor, it's just the armor buff and other things like that. It's just become a pretty strong tank. You know, decent for all sort of situations. Very versatile. So that does it for all the heavies. Now we're moving on to medium tanks, starting with the 121. Honestly, I would say there's nothing super special about this tank. You know, it's got great armor and it's good against mediums. You know, it's got good DPM, but you know what? It's not that bad, dude. I might actually just put it in strong. I think it's a pretty strong tank. It's just, it's nothing, it's almost not special. But it is, because it's got good DPM and it's got a good gun. But as soon as you load heat, man, this thing just, it's dead. You know, just load heat against it and it's a problem. We've got its little brother or big brother or equal brother twin, the 121B. This thing has, it's pretty much the same kind of tank. You know, it's got higher view range, slightly different kind of gun, similar armor. But honestly, I would pick the 121 over the 121B, in my personal opinion. I'd recommend that more. Moving on, we got the Czech medium, the TVP T50/51. This tank is elite. It's not good enough to go in God tier, but it is phenomenal. That gun, with such a small intraclip reload, you can burst damage so quickly and catch opponents off guard when they're moving in the open and absolutely shred people. You can even work around, you can get around the poor reload time. You can get around it, and if you can, you'll have a lot of fun in this tank, and I think it's really great. It's also got really, like, pretty decent camo, and it's really fast, so honestly, it's great as like a sniper. Okay, next up, we've got the French tier 10 medium tank, the Batchat 25T. This is a problem for me, right? Because it's not that it's not special, it's just that it's not strong. And for me, this is kind of a hard thing for me, a hard place for me to put this tank. I'm going to put it in not special. You know, it's basically just this tank that drives around, it bursts out a bunch of damage, and that's pretty much it. Essentially, it's a TVP with one less bullet. But I would play the TVP over this tank. I feel like with this thing's got a longer intraclip reload, and sure, it can do more damage, but your TVP can just keep somebody tracked and keep them stuck in the open, even if they choose to repair. You could play the Chaffee tier 4, honestly, and you'll have the, you know, similar kind of gameplay as the Batchat 25T, but you drop down a tier, and I've been having a lot of fun in the Chaffee tier. I think it's really fun. Yeah, I'd recommend that over this tank. I don't recommend anybody goes to this tank. I think Wargaming need to do something. I think they need to buff this tank. It's not in the stage where it should be, and for that reason, I've put it in not special. Moving on, we've got the AMX 30B. This tank is okay. You know, it can be fun. I'm gonna put it in strong. I think it's a strong tank. It's got pretty good turret armor. You can do like a fun ramming build because it's quite fast. It's decent at like bullying people. The only issue is it can get quite annoying because its penetration can sometimes be super annoying to have to deal with. To fire, you know, to be shooting with, like 248 and 300, it's not good for a tier 10. Like you can get that on most tier 9 medium tanks. So that can make it quite frustrating. But with its decent turret, you know, it's got good gun depression. It can do stuff. You know, it's not overpowered, but it can be fun. Can be fun to play. Moving on, we've got the E50M. This is a strong tank, I would say. It's got really good armor, and it's quite heavy for a medium tank with a pretty good gun. You can do, again, a really fun ramming build with this kind of a tank, and you can really, really, really surprise even heavy tanks if you ram them inside with how much damage you're going to do to them. It's quite a fun tank, and I look forward to getting it. But I've seen some disgusting builds with this tank. Moving on, we've got the Leopard 1. This is a god tier tank. I think this is one of, if not the best mediums in the game. But now that I say that and I look at the lineup and I see a lion coming, I'm going to put this thing in elite. Like I said, it's one of, if not the best, depending on your kind of playstyle. It's super sneaky, it's super fast, it's got really good scouting capabilities on your like bushy light tanks maps, especially if there's no light tanks. You can swap out and do like a bit of a spotting build instead. But it's got a really, really nice gun, super accurate, really high DPM. It doesn't have armor, but it makes up for that in every other way. So I would really recommend this tank to anybody. Okay, next up, we've got the Progetto 65. This thing got nerfed for no reason, but I think it got nerfed because they brought out the Lion pretty much around the same time. So they wanted people to play the new Progetto, which is the Lion, right? I still think this tank is strong. I think it can be done, it can be used in a really good way by really good players. It racks up damage way quicker than a lot of people think. 360 alpha, 4 rounds, 2.5 second entry clip. It's strong. It's strong. And because it has that auto reloading functionality, you can fire a shot and let your shot reload, and you can do what other autoloaders can't in a way. Like if you're playing in a bat chat and you want to blind fire a bush, you have to shoot that round, and then you'd have to reload the entire magazine for 30 seconds or whatever it is, 35. But with the Progetto, you can shoot that round. Just be willy-nilly, even if you think you're not going to pen a guy, shoot the round, you're just reloading. You reload it back, and you have that awesome flexibility, which makes this tank still really strong. And I think if you understand how auto-reloading works and you're good with that mechanic, you can make this tank probably even elite. I'm not there yet, so for me, I'm going to put this thing at strong. Moving on to the new Progetto 65. It's the Lion. This thing is god tier. There's no doubt about it. It is absolutely amazing. Its DPM is stupid. Essentially, the way to play this tank is so it has that auto reloading mechanic that the Progetto has, where like the deeper you go into your mag, the longer the reload is. That last round is something you really don't want to be firing. Though 20 seconds is really long for that. The ideal scenario is to be shooting that first bullet, right? Shooting the second bullet, and then letting that second bullet reload and shooting again, because then you'd have somewhere around the same DPM as a Leopard, maybe a little bit worse, but you'll have really good DPM with that round. And then on top of that, if you want, you can shoot out another 3 or another 2 420 alpha shots. So you can obliterate people with this tank. On top of it, it's packing pretty good view range. It's got 9 degrees of gun depression. It's got, you just need some vert stabs on this tank. It's got good accuracy. It's a solid tank, dude. It's fast. There's almost nothing bad about this tank. In my opinion, I don't think it should have gone into the game, but you can't change what Wargaming does, right? In my opinion, it's a god tier tank. I think it's absolutely broken, and I hate going up against it because I'm scared for my life. Next up, we've got quite a rare tank, the Carro da Combattimento 45T, or CDC 45T, whatever you want to call it. This tank is honestly very similar to a Progetto. It's got better turret armor than a Progetto, but same kind of gun, same kind of accuracy. And honestly, overall, if you can make the Progetto work, you're going to make this tank work. you can just maybe be a bit better on a ridgeline because of the slightly better turret. Moving on from the Italians, we've got the Japanese tier 10 medium tank, the STB-1. This is an elite sniping tank. This tank is phenomenal. It's got the best gun depression in the class with the hydrodynamic suspension. It's a really great scout. It can be super sneaky. It's got a really, really great gun. It's got really great really great DPM. It's got a nice turret. People usually can't pen it. So on a ridgeline, it's great. It kind of just fits the meta, and I would recommend this tank for anybody to go for. Okay, following that, we've got the CS53. This tank is the fastest medium tank in the game, and it's packing a really, really good win ratio. And honestly, I would like to put it in God tier, purely because of its speed. The things it can do is like, it's actually outrageous. Otherwise, it's got a good turret, it's got a good gun, it's super flexible. Good gun depression. It's just an all-round solid tank, but on top of that, it's really fast. So, in that regard, I would put it at God tier because there's no other medium tank that can do what it can do. So I think that's really, really cool. Following the CS63, we've got the UDES 1516. I would like to put this thing in strong. I don't think it's elite. It does pretty much what an STB-1 can do, with, I think, 1 degree less of gun depression. It's also super sneaky, and it's got that slim pancake form factor, which kind of just makes it nice on a ridgeline and harder to hit, It's great hold down, just like the STB-1. It's basically like a slightly worse STB-1, but still really strong, and it's a fun tank. It's currently top of the tree. Maybe I'd recommend going for it if you're on that line already. All right, and following that, we've got the first British medium tank at tier 10, the Centurion Action 10. This thing used to be nothing special, and it used to be this, okay DPM, okay counter turret, okay view range, all that stuff. But now with this buff, I would put this thing in God tier. I think it is probably second to the Lion in terms of like medium tanks at tier 10. It has such good DPM. It has a really nice turret. It's got such great ammunition. And it's super flexible and super fast. It's just really great if you know how to almost select your engagements. I think it's really great. And if you're new at the game, it can be pretty easy to play as well. It's very simple. You go to a ridgeline, 10 degrees of gun depression, aim down, shoot. It's pretty simple. Okay, following the Centurion Action 10, we've got the Concept 5. Get this thing out the game, man. They did them dirty. This is a wheeled British medium tank. Now, unlike the regular medium tanks, in the regular wheeled tanks in the game, the French ones, we've got the EBR, for example. This thing, obviously, the way that it works in terms of like its movement is it can't turn on the spot. It has to like drive forward and turn. So it's, it has that as a slight issue, if you would even like to call it an issue. But with this thing, with these wheeled mediums, all of them, they can turn on the spot, which is kind of cool. And it's really fast for a medium tank. It's not as fast as the CS63, of course, but it's pretty fast. It's got a good gun, but really poor DPM. It's obviously meant to be that kind of tank that moves around, shoots, moves around, shoots. It's just not for my playstyle, and Wargaming really did this line dirty by putting it in the game like this. It's just a big old block. If you're lucky, you might ricochet certain lower caliber. What's that? 121 and higher will be able to overmatch that, but otherwise it's going to ricochet. It's just not a great tank. I just don't think it's that good. So for that reason, I'm putting it in the removed tier. So next up, we're moving on to the American mediums. We've got the M48A5 Patton. Now this tank is nothing extreme, but it's a really solid, strong, all-rounded American brawler that is actually really decent. It's pretty simple to play. It's got this like angled hull armor on the side, so you can over angle in a lot of cases, and it's got a decent turret, it's got okay gun depression, you know, it's decent gun depression, and it's got a nice gun. I think it's just an all-round good tank, and I do recommend it. Next up, we've got the reward version of the M60, and honestly, I don't think it's that great. I'm gonna put this thing in trash. It's got arguably a better gun, and it's more of a sniper than the M48A5 pattern. But this thing is, it's like, I don't even know, dude. It's like got less armor than the pattern, but a better gun. So it's like a cross between a sniper and a brawler, but not a good version of that, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's just not a great tank all around, I think. So I'm gonna put this thing in trash. It's not terrible enough to remove from the game, but I just think it's trash. Got a big old weak point. Yeah, get it out the game, man. Okay, next up we got the T95E6. Now this tank actually just recently went into the game. If you've logged into World of Tanks, you would have gotten a free gift from Wargaming, a free tier 9 premium, or free tier 9 reward tank, if you will. The Patton tank, or Patton the tank. It is, that thing is, get that thing out the game, man. It's horrendous. There's it's literally, it's a clone of this tank, which is essentially this tier 10, I think it's Clan War reward tank. So like, you know, it's got this, okay, it's got better hull armor than the Patton tank, but it's got much more DPM, it's got a way better accuracy. I don't know what they were thinking with putting Patton the tank into the game, but whatever. We're not talking about that tank for now. Now it's the turret armor. So like, even you can see the turret armor is on paper really strong, but it's got these weaker points around the mantlet, which make it pretty easy to pen. And obviously it's got that big weak point, which you should be aiming for all the time. It's got a pretty decent hull, which can, you know, hit up some ricochets if they manage to hit it. And it's angled like this. I wouldn't recommend side scraping though. It's got that weak at the back. It's got that super bad. I wouldn't recommend side scraping in this tank though. It's got that weak point at the back, and it can be quite horrendous. Overall, I'm just gonna put this thing in not special. Yeah, not special. Yeah, it's got a good gun. That's pretty much it. So yeah, that'll do it for all of the American medium tanks. Moving on, we've got the Russian T-22 medium. This thing is really strong. I think this tank is absolutely amazing. It's got this sort of like X or V-shaped hull, which allows it to pull off some absolutely crazy kinds of side scrape. Look at this over angling, man. Against standard rounds, this thing is crazy. A lot of the time you can bait people into shooting your side, and like they will shoot this. If you're busy focusing somebody here, they'll shoot you. They'll try and aim for your side and be very confused when they should actually just be aiming for this plate. But yeah, it's like a standard Russian medium tank. You know, it's got good gun depression. It's got nice small little weak points on the turret. It's got a really, really strong turret with slight weak points. You know, obviously if you start loading some gold, you'll have a higher chance. But yeah, like I said, this tank, even against heat and you can over angle like this, look at that, some of that 900 millimeters on some plates, but around 300, high 300s you're going to be looking at. It's a solid tank. I would actually put this thing in strong, dude. I think this elite, sorry. I think this thing is really, really strong, and for a good player, you're going to do really well. It's just a standard Russian medium though, so if you know how to play these kind of tanks, you're going to do very well in it. Moving on, we've got the K91, a little bit of a sneaky rear-mounted medium. I think it's there's so many tanks that are like in between strong and not special, dude. I don't know. Honestly, I'd say it's not that special. It's got good camo, and it's a pretty good sniper, an all-round capacity. It's not terrible, but if you want to play this kind of gameplay, just go and play like a Leopard or a STB1, and you'll have a way better time because those tanks are way better. Moving on, we've got the Object 430U. This is a elite tank. I think this tank is phenomenal. It's got just this miracle armor that seems to just randomly bounce. It's very noob friendly. It's got a nice high rifle gun. You know, it's not as accurate as like the Object 140 or something like that, but it's a strong tank. It's got nice armor, you know, pretty all-rounded in all the statistics, and it's pretty strong in that regard. I would recommend this tank for new players and anybody who wants to just have fun. Moving on, we've got the Object 262A. Essentially, this used to be the tier 10 before the Object 140, but they removed it and made it a collector's vehicle. And so once you've got any tier 10 Russian tank, you can buy this thing for 6.1 million credits. But like you'd be silly to go for this thing when you can just grind up for the 140. The 140 is way better, and I really recommend playing for the 140, not the T62A. I would just say it's trash, dude. I don't know. It's got some good statistics, but I don't think it's good enough to even go in not special. That's so sad to say, but you know, I don't know. That's how I feel, man. So moving on, we've got the second to last or penultimate medium tank at tier 10. We've got the Object 140. This thing is elite, just as good as the Object 430U. It does similar things with its turret, but it has a better gun with better gun depression, a better accuracy, and better DPM. You know, it doesn't have the alpha, but they're like roughly the same kind of tank. This, you know, Object 430 sacrifices its gun handling and, I don't know, probably sneakiness, view range. Maybe they're all the same. I actually don't know those soft stats. But what it sacrifices that for, it gains an armor. And the Object 140 gains a great gun with obviously less hull armor, but a really great turret still. So I think a lot of people can make this thing work, and I think it's really great for new players. I would really recommend this tank, and yeah, solid tank, dude. Go for it. I think it's great. Following the 140, we've got the Object 907. It's very similar to the T22 medium in the way that it's got a really, really nice shaped armor, like hull armor. You know, it's got that same kind of V, almost like, yeah, rounded shape where you can side scrape and bait people into shooting your side. It's got that, you know, it's got a good turret, same as the T22 medium. It's pretty similar. So if you're going to do well in this tank, you're going to do well in the T22 medium. The only thing is, be careful when you're side scraping. You can see the turret ring kind of goes through the tank here. So if you're side scraping like this, you can see they can go straight through it, pretty much all the way along the bottom. So if you're ever versing this thing and you see this thing side scraping, aim through like the bottom part of the tracks, and you'll probably start seeing some green, where you can easily pen this thing. So yeah, but otherwise this thing is quite a behemoth. It's got nice hull armor, it's got small weak points, pretty good turret armor, you know, nice gun, nice DPM, it's fast. It's just a great tank, and I actually might, yeah, it's elite. I think it's really good. I love my Russian mediums, so I hope you do too. That'll do it for the medium tanks. Moving on to the light tanks now. We've got the WZ1321. Now, this thing is just trash, dude. It's just trash. Like, why would you play this tank when you can play something like an AMX-13 105? You know, this thing, has a nice turret, which can occasionally bounce. It's just lacking in all the other statistics, and against other light tanks, it just sucks. It's kind of supposed to be this almost medium-esque tank, but like, you're just letting your team down, because for all you know, you could be going up against the Manticore, and then all of a sudden you can't spot the Manticore and he can spot you, and your team lose because of that. If you want to play this kind of a tank, just play a medium tank, play your 121, play Object 140. You might as well, instead of this tank. That's my personal opinion. Moving on, we've got the EBR 105, the fastest tank in the game. Now, for me, I would put this thing in elite. I don't think it's god tier. It does pull off these miracle absorbs by the fucking wheels. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But almost every time I shoot at this tank, I hit the wheels and they just absorb the shot. It's annoying. But for that regard, it's really great as a light tank, right? It's obviously that different kind of gameplay. It's an active scout. It's this new revolutionary type of scouting, as opposed to just going to a bush and moving to the next bush and spotting that way. You know, this tank gets up in your face, up close and personal, spots you, can move around you so quick. It's really good, but it's only good if you know how to play these kind of tanks. If you don't know how to play them, I wouldn't recommend it. It's quite difficult to learn, but it can be fun if you learn it and you know how to do it. Moving on, after the EBR, we've got the last French light tank. We've got the AMX-13 105. This tank, I would like to put it in God tier purely because it's the most dangerous light tank in the game in terms of its damage output. It can club other light tanks, and that's what it's good at. And it's even good at, you know, fighting mediums and some heavies even. This thing is dangerous. It's sneaky. It's fast. It's got that great autoloader. Wouldn't recommend pushing around a corner if this thing is, you know, waiting for you there. But overall, solid tank. I think it's probably the second best light tank in the game. Okay, moving on. We've got the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, the German light tank. I think this thing has an okay gun. I still think it's trash though. It's got such a big form factor, you know, so it's super easy to see, to pen. It's just feeling like it's lacking. It's similar to the WZ1321, where it, you know, you might as well play something else. Play a Leopard instead of this thing. You know, why are you playing this thing? I don't know. Even though it got a buff, you can do some good things in this tank if you're able to catch maybe like a less experienced light tank off guard, and just DPM them with that nice gun. It can be good. Like I said, pretty much all of these tanks can be good if played well, but this is my personal opinion. I think this thing is trash. Okay, and moving on to the Manticore. This is the best light tank, in my opinion, in the game. It is super sneaky, absolutely amazing with its view range capabilities if you have a good crew. The only thing is you kind of need to have a good crew because it's super high pressure, three-man crew, in order to be super, I guess, competitive or super good in this tank. You need to have a good crew. So it can be kind of hard for newer players. I wouldn't recommend it for newer players. But I'm currently grinding up this tree, and it is actually quite a terrible grind. So if you're not looking forward to a good ground, don't do it. But otherwise, you know, it's got a little, you know, it's got such a little bit of ammunition, but it's good. It's got good alpha, so it can hit some shots every now and then, and you can rack up like 2,000 damage in a game if you play it right, which is quite good, you know. But overall, the best scout in the game, I think. You know, if you're a WZ, God forbid you go up against a Manticore, because good luck finding this thing. Okay, we've got next up the American Sheridan. I think this thing is just not special. It's just as big as the Panzerwagen. I'm actually going to put it in trash, man. You know, it's got a derp gun, but so does the tier 9, so you might as well play the tier 9 with the derp gun. Same kind of tank, literally. The T49, I think it's called. Yeah, it's great for bullying lightly armored vehicles, but it's not the greatest scout. For that reason, I'm going to put it in trash, because the whole idea of light tanks is to be this scout. You know, even the AMX-13 105 can probably scout better than this thing, because of its small form factor. Okay, moving on, we've got the T100 LT. This is probably the third best light tank in the game, apart from these two. I think it's super sneaky with its very pancake shape, you know, as it is. It's the super pancake. It's actually got a really good turret that a lot of people don't realize. It can actually ricochet quite a lot if it's looking at you, and because of that, I think it's deserving of going in the God tier section. Otherwise, like, yeah, it's super well-rounded. It's got a nice gun. It's got pretty decent camo. It's a nice view range. It's probably the easiest light tank to play for new players, so I would recommend it. And hopefully you go and check it out. Following the T100 LT, we move off of the light tanks onto the tank destroyers. We've got first up the not WZ, the one, I think it's it is WZ 113 GFT. This thing is just not special. I don't know. It's got a big old gun. It's got pretty okay armor, nice ammunition. You know, it's okay mobility. It's just an all-round okay tank. So I don't think it's anything special. After that, we've got the WZ114 SP2. This tank it's a reward. I think it's clan reward. I think it's a strong tank. It's got, you know, good turret armor, good DPM. It's basically like a heavy pseudo tank destroyer kind of thing. You can play it like a heavy. It's gonna get penned probably, but you know, you can outtrade people with its good DPM, especially other heavy tanks. So yeah, I would say it's a good tank. I would recommend it. I've played against this thing and I've been very shocked on stream, like how quickly it reloads. I was caught off guard as a Caliban and it hit me once. I was trying to fall back and then all of a sudden it hit me again after like 8 seconds and I was like, what is this reload? And it hit me for like 500. I was scared. So yeah, it's a really solid tank. Would recommend. Moving on from the Chinese, which I think that is actually the last Chinese tank. Yeah, bye-bye. There goes all the Chinese tanks. We've got the Foch 155. This tank is strong. I'd say it's strong. It's got that 3-round autoloader, 5-second interclip, 750 damage. If you catch people off guard, you can dominate with this tank. It's got okay armor, you know, it might be able to ricochet, but it's got a big old weak point, that little hammerhead looking thing. So, you know, it's not broken. I don't think it's broken. I think it's just solid. And if you know how to play these kind of tanks, you're going to enjoy it. And speaking of these kind of tanks, here's the Foch B or Foch B. This thing is pretty much, well, the Foch 155 used to be the tier 10. Now the Foch B is the tier 10. It's practically the same tank. It has literally everything else is the same as far as I know. It just has a different gun. So instead of 3 rounds, it's got 5 rounds, but lower alpha. And it's got a much shorter interclip. I think it's like 2.5 seconds interclip reload. So I would play this thing over a Foch 155. And I'd actually probably put it in elite. I think this is a solid tank, but it is kind of difficult to play. You know, autoloaders are always quite a niche, and you either do know or you don't know how to play them. So that's up to you to decide if you want to go for that. Next up, we've got the Guerrilla 15. Now this line, before I speak about the tank itself, the line to grind towards the Guerrilla 15 is, I hate the Nashorn at tier 6 and I hate the Steyr Mill at tier 7. But the Rheinmetall Borsig and the WTF Panzer IV at tier 8 and tier 9 are absolutely phenomenal tanks, and I love them. They're super sneaky, super great, just like their tier 10, right? You got 750 alpha, you got a really nice accurate gun, you're a really good sniper and super sneaky, so you can sit at the back, but just hopefully you don't get spotted. Honestly, I would put this thing in strong. I think it's a very strong tank, but I don't think it's elite unless you are really good with that kind of a playstyle, but I'm not the best. So yeah. Following the Guerrilla 15, we've got the big brother, the Jagdpanzer E100. I think this thing is elite, purely because of its 1000 alpha. It's got really good armor. It basically brawls like a mouse or an E100, but it's a tank destroyer. So what that means is that on a game where, for example, you are the only tank destroyer, you're the Jagdpanzer E100, and there's one other tank destroyer on the enemy team, and it's like a Stridsvagn 103B. This thing can go and play as a heavy tank and absolutely dominate the heavy tank areas, which can give your team an upper hand, because right now, obviously, heavy tanks are the meta, right? So if you can support your heavy tanks and get them to win, you're most likely going to win your games. So this thing's really great for, I think, getting good win ratios if you know how to play it. and know how to side scrape and all that stuff. So now we've got the WTF E100. Technically, it's in the game, but you don't see a lot of them. It's super rare. I think this thing is just disgusting. It's god tier. Its autoloader is absolutely disgusting, and I'm so glad Wargaming got it out the game, man. Obviously now you can get it in the game for rentals during certain events, but obviously it's got that really good gun, and it has like okay sort of gun handling, which you can improve, but it's obviously its armor is horrendous. It's just this giant absolute behemoth of a tank that just is so easy to find, so easy to pen, like good luck bouncing in this thing, right? 5 degrees of gun depression isn't that much. You don't really need it because this thing kind of just snipes at the back. But even from far away, man, this thing is huge. So it's really easy to pen. Load your HE rounds, destroy this thing as soon as you can. Hopefully you don't have to meet it on the battlefield because of its autoloader. It is absolutely filthy how much it can hurt. Okay, moving on, we've got the Minotauro. In my opinion, the best tank destroyer in the game at the moment. The Contracara Minotauro. It is yet again another blur between, like, it is yet again another combination of a heavy tank and a tank destroyer, because it's got this amazing frontal armor. It's got a flexible gun. It's got a semi-traversable turret, so it can work ridge lines. It's got really good gun depression. It's got super high alpha. But what's cool about it is that it has an autoloader, but it's not a traditional autoloader where it's about bursting out damage. What they've done with it is they've got this 8-second intraclip reload with where 23 seconds to load the entire clip, right? So what you got to do is play this tank. It's got 530 alpha. Play it like you have this 530 alpha 8-second reload tank, which can absolutely out DPM anybody. Shoot them, out trade them, dominate them, and then fall back and play around that reload. If you have other tanks playing with you, they can push up while you're busy reloading. It's really great. It's got poor dispersion, but it's meant to be a brawling tank. Up close and personal. Like its armor is crazy. It's got that weak point on the top, but as soon as you use your gun depression, bye bye to the weak point. Only if you start loading some real hefty rounds are you going to even have a chance to go through this thing, man. Like, even if I try and compare it against like a WT a Jagdpanzer E100, right? This thing, even with this is the highest pen in the game, or one of, if not the highest. Look at that, dude. Look at that. Good luck hitting that or the Jagdpanzer E100. You're not going to hit that in a million years. But as you can see, as soon as it isn't using its gun depression, it's terrible. Another thing to note is that as soon as you show its side at all, something even like this, just load heat, man. You can even do this, but this is a Jagdpanzer E100, so it's not fair to judge that. Let's just put it against itself, right? Load some heat. There you go. Pen all of this on the side. It's not the greatest side scraper, so I wouldn't recommend doing that, but this tank is broken, and I really recommend you go for this tank. Set it up with a turbo, set it up with some vert stabs, maybe improved aiming, maybe a gun, you can't do gun rammer, maybe vents to make that reload slightly better and all-round capacity. It can even almost sort of spot for itself. It's just a really good tank, dude. I think it's the best TD in the game. Okay, moving on. We've got the Stridsvang 103B. This is a really great sniper. It's got that really cool where is it? It's got that really cool heat shield in the front, spaced armor, which is really effective against heat rounds. So what's really great about this tank as well is that it has this like 40-50 millimeter plate. It's 40 in the middle, but 50 on the sides, which can auto ricochet all 120 and lower caliber guns, which is a lot of the tier 10s, right? Like this thing's only 105 millimeter. So you can wiggle your tank up and down like this, and if you're on a ridgeline, good luck, because nobody's going to be able to pen this weak point since you're moving like this, unless you're very unlucky. Or you can even do something like this. Like, they're not going to pen that, dude. It's super small to see. So yeah. Otherwise, it's super sneaky. It's super fast. It has that insane reverse speed, insane top speed forwards. It's got really crazy DPM. It's super accurate. You can make this one of the most accurate tanks in the game, if not the most accurate tank in the game. Yeah. Pretty poor view range, though, so you might need to bump that up if you're looking to spot. Overall, I would definitely say this is an elite vehicle. I don't think it's God tier because it doesn't fit the meta quite well, but it's still a very, very strong tank. So moving on, we have the first of the British tank destroyers at tier 10. We have the FV215B1A3. This used to be the tier 10, as far as I know, but they've now put it as a reward tank. This tank is basically an FE4005, which we'll get onto now, but with armor. Similar armor to the FE215B, as far as I know. So I'm pretty sure it has that side scraping weak point. It's not really meant for side scraping, as you can see. But you know, it doesn't have the best. This is also against, hang on, very high penetration rounds. You know, if you put this thing up against, I don't know, like maybe an IS-7, I don't know. See, an IS-7, if this thing's using its gun depression looking over the side, is going to have a hard time penning this thing with standard rounds. Obviously, if it loads gold, it's going to be able to go through it. But like I said, it's literally an FE4005 with armor. So what's great about these tanks is they have these insane sort of premium rounds, and obviously they're hash, right? So it's less penetration than the standard rounds, 230. But if you catch the side of any tank, it's pretty much a one shot. 1,750 damage is stupid. It's like there's a lot of tier 8s that don't even, like tier 8 mediums that don't have that kind of armor on the front of their tank. If you're able to work with the poor accuracy and terrible shell velocity, you can make this tank have some absolute banger games. You can even penetrate most tier 10s with 310 millimeters of pen on the hull somewhere. So it's a great tank. I wouldn't say it's broken. I wouldn't even put it in elite. I'd probably just put it as strong. If you know how to play these kind of tanks, it can be kind of boring. So yeah, but if you can make it work, it's great. Moving on, we've got the FV4005, which is literally the exact same kind of gun. It's less accurate though. Same ammo, same gun. It's just the same thing, but it's this big old box barn that anybody can pen with HE 14 millimeters pretty much anywhere. I wouldn't recommend going for this tank unless you are a player who just wants to go and have fun, you know, load up some gold, fire some premium rounds, and absolutely shit on tanks because of its high alpha. But you gotta try and catch people off guard. That's something I would recommend about this tank. Accordingly, I'm gonna put it in strong. I think it's still a strong tank. Okay, moving on, we've got the Badger. The Badger, this thing is definitely god tier. You can set it up to have the highest DPM in the game, I'm pretty sure. It's got pretty okay ammunition, but really nice HE. Otherwise, look at this. Look at this, dude. This thing on a ridgeline, good luck going through this thing. This thing is terrifying. It's got really good gun depression. It's got insane frontal armor. You can even side scrape a bit with it like that. And even turn it to the side to face people. So it's even thicker. Like you're getting 300. And so, you know, if you load gold, most of the time, if you load gold, anything's going to suck. But if you're able to turn it to the side like this and look on a ridgeline, even with gold, looking at trying to go at like 350 millimeters of penetration on the weak points, This thing is insane, and you can just bully people with that DPM, with that rate of fire, that high alpha, especially lower tier tanks. Like, they're not going to be able to deal with this thing. It's super fun, and I am looking forward to getting it as well. I'm close. This thing would recommend for anyone. It's pretty simple to play, but really, really fun overall. Okay, moving on, we've got the T110E3. This is a super noob-friendly tank destroyer. All it is this big old gun, nice armor, got weak points, but you just kind of just push around a corner, take your shot, fall back. It's got really nice penetration. That's pretty much it, dude. Super noob friendly, nice tank. I'd put it at strong. Next up, we've got the T110E4. This is essentially the T110E3, but with a turret. Now, I think this thing is cool because it's more flexible than a T110E3. It's got the same gun, so you can do the same kind of things, but it's obviously better like on a ridge line or like peeking over certain angles and things like that. That's why I think it's more flexible. But I think its armor is a little bit worse than the T110E3, so they kind of just trade some things with each other, but they're roughly the same kind of tank in a way. They're like heavy brawlers, right? Moving on to the Object 268 version 5. This thing is really strong. I think it's got great selection of ammunition, including HE with nice HE pen. It's pretty mobile. It's got pretty decent armor. You know, it's got a weak point on the top, but there's nothing really much you can do. You can see here, it's got like 160 on that lower part. Like tier 8s are going to be able to go through that. No problem. Its armor can hold up somewhat well, but then again, this is looking at its own rounds, which are bloody good. 300 millimeters of penetration on its standard rounds. You're looking at, 260 on its front, and if it's using its gun depression, like 300. Good luck going through this thing with standard rounds. You're gonna have to load gold. So its turret is actually really, really decent, even though it doesn't show it. It's because it's showing against its own 300 millimeter penetration, right? This thing's great at brawling heavies. Overall, just a fantastic tank destroyer. I would recommend it, but it is a reward tank, so it's quite rare and hard to get. Okay, moving on, we've got the Object 268 version 4. This used to be the best tank destroyer in the game. They've nerfed it. I still think it's pretty strong though. It's got that nice armor. It's got a weak point, but if you're moving, it's super mobile. It's got that nice gun, close quarters kind of brawling tank. Another one of those, mix between a heavy and tank destroyer tanks. I would recommend it, but it is kind of hard to play in a way because it's locked on the, it doesn't have a turret. But it still can be really fun, so enjoy it. Following the 268 version 4, we've got the Object 268. Now this thing is pretty much just like not special. It's very similar to the WZ-111 GFT in a way that it's just got this big gun. It's got pretty okay armor. It's okay mobile. Like, it's got good rounds. It's just like an all-round okay tank. I wouldn't recommend it for too many people, but it can do well if you play it well. Finally, we've got the last tank destroyer, the Ho-Ri 3. This is the new Japanese tank destroyer. It's pretty good. In my opinion, it's essentially a mini Jagdpanzer E100, which is why I think this thing deserves to go either in strong or elite. I'm going to put it in strong. I think it's really strong. I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's overpowered, but it's got like in between a Jagdpanzer E100 and like, it's not even in between. It's literally just a mini Jagdpanzer E100, man. Like, 300 millimeters on its cheeks. You're just going to need to load gold and go through that. It's kind of like an E100 in that regard. It's got this nice angled upper hull. If you use all your gun depression, you're gonna probably need to load gold for that, depending on your penetration. No weak point on the top. Pretty okay side scraper, but it's got this weak point on the top here because of the angled. and this front plate here just goes green. So it's really tricky, but it's got a really nice gun and it's got really good DPM. 700 alpha is pretty solid. It's got nice ammunition. I would recommend it. I think it's great. I don't think it's for all players. I don't think it's everybody's kind of play style, but it's a fun tank, and yeah, would recommend. So that does it for all of the tank destroyers. We are now moving on to the artillery, and excuse this boo-boo. I don't quite know how to remove this, so forgive me for that, but it's already been handled. It's the Object 268 version 5. All right. Starting with the Batchat 15558, the only auto-loading artillery in the game. I think this thing is probably elite in terms of artillery. Because of that autoloader, you can dump out shells really quick, but then it does have that super long downtime. So it has its, it has its strengths and weaknesses. It's the most unique kind of gameplay, so it's probably the most fun to play, and the line is not that bad going up to it, so I would recommend. Next up, we've got the GWE 100, the thickest armor artillery in the game, so it doesn't get penned by HE. Wow, standard HE rounds at least. I think this thing is just not special. It's just another artillery, nothing really special about it. Yeah, I haven't played it. I don't play much artillery, but from what I know, it can hit hard, but not always. So you just got to be careful with that. Next up, we've got the Conqueror GC, which used to be really good, but now it's not. Honestly, I'm just going to put it in not special as well. I don't think it's that great. It's got a super slow shell velocity, so it's super hard to hit your targets, and that can make it feel really frustrating, Following that, we have the T92. This thing, I think, is probably the best artillery, in my opinion. It's got a really long reload, but pretty much all of them do at tier 10. But it's got the biggest gun in the game, the 240mm. What's interesting about that is that you can load the AP rounds, the regular rounds, which have like 300mm of penetration, 340 or something, and you can overmatch like any plate in the game. With 240mm caliber on the gun, you can overmatch anything. So, if it's at the end of the game or something like that, you can go full TD mode, load a AP round, peek a corner, take a shot, and deliver that AP round and just go through anybody. I think it's really cool. That's also like a sort of unique-ish kind of gameplay, so I think that's fun. Okay, and finally we have the Object 261, the final tank to go on this tier list. This tank is arguably statistically the best in the game. It's got a poor shell trajectory, but it's got decent ammo and it's quite fast. It does also have the shortest reload, so you can deliver like multiple shells a lot better than other artillery can. Besides from the Batchat when it's unloading, So yeah, I think it's just solid, all round decent tank. And that will do it. That'll do it. There's my final tier list. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have anything that you want to add, let me know down below in the comments. Take it easy on me, all right? There might be some tanks that you don't think are as bad that I think are bad, and that's perfectly fine. We might have varying levels of skill. I might be way worse than you are, and that's perfectly fine. But yeah, it's been really fun to do this tier list. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you guys do have a really nice Christmas today. Spend it with your family and your friends and your close ones, and enjoy it. Relax. Take it easy. And we'll see you in the next stream. Probably after New Year. I think I'm going to be taking a break from streaming until the end of the year. So yeah, thank you all for supporting me. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, and if you didn't, dislike. We'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.